Hey there, everybody. On to the next module and our next film. This is our final film for this course. We are revisiting a film called Nosferatu. Now, we watched the original in Module 3, I believe. That's a 1922 German expressionistic film. And they did a remake. There's an American remake that was released in 2024. Now, right off the top, I want to have some warnings about graphic content. This film definitely has some jump scares. There is nudity and sexual situations in the film, and there's some blood and gore. Now, I was expecting more blood and gore, but it's definitely there, and the stuff that is there is pretty gruesome. So what I'm saying to you is, if this film isn't for you, this isn't something you feel comfortable watching, there is another option for you. There is another Module 16, and in that module, we're watching the film Wicked. You could pick one or the other. You don't have to do both. You only have to do one. And then you would just follow the material in the Wicked module and kind of forget about this one. If you want to watch this film, then you just follow along in this one, do all the work, and then you're completed. You don't have to worry about the other one. So just make sure that you're either doing Nosferatu or Wicked, not both. All right? Now, moving on to this film, Nosferatu. This is an American film. It was released in 2024. And although this is a global cinema class, the United States is part of the global kind of marketplace. So we're just going to look at an American film. And although, again, it was a U.S. film, it was filmed in Prague, Czech Republic. And the director was Robert Eggers, who's an American filmmaker. This is a remake, again, Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, 1922. That's the film that's being remade, and it's coming out 102 years later. So what's kind of cool about this is that we are going to see, from the first one to the second one, you can see the complete evolution of the film industry when you look at this. How stories are told, cinema language, cinematography, acting, sound, you can see it all kind of transform and evolve between the two projects. The genre here is gothic horror film, and the original was a gothic horror film, but it was part of the German expressionistic movement, and you can go back and revisit that module to hear more about that. This film did receive Oscar nominations for cinematography, production design, costume, hair, and makeup, which is a little bit unique for a horror film. Usually we think of horror films as just those kind of fun movies you go to sometimes in the Halloween month, October, and you go there and you grab your popcorn and you have fun just getting scared with your friends, right? And usually you don't think of those films as being kind of award movies or artistic pieces of cinema. But this film was able to accomplish that and more. So, real quick, just as I kind of forgot about it, look back up at the director there. Robert Eggers, those are some of the projects that he did. The Witch, The Lighthouse, and Northman. Those are three previous projects that he did before he did this one. Nosferatu was nominated for awards by 25 different organizations. So what do we mean by that? So there's the Oscars, there's the BAFTAs, which is the British version of the Oscars. There's like Cannes, there's the Critics' Choice Award, there's the Golden Globes, there's all kinds of different awards. And 25 different organizations nominated this film for awards. They got 67 nominations over those 25 organizations, and they had 11 wins. So again, this was a critically acclaimed, successful, artistic film. And it had great box office success. It grossed $95 million in the United States and $181 million internationally. So those are great accomplishments for a film that's considered a horror film. Usually you don't find those types of films, horror films, in that kind of world playing in that. Sometimes they have box office success, but they don't necessarily have all the awards and accolades, excuse me. Things to think about. So just kind of remembering as you watch the film and go through all this stuff. The original movie, the 1922 version, was an unauthorized telling of Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, which came out in 1897. So this is kind of the Dracula story told in an unauthorized form back 1922, and then this is a remake of that. Now, Bram Stoker's been that story's in Dracula is in public domain, so there is no kind of copyright thing to think about there. And so you're going to see some elements from the actual Dracula, the novel, and that particular story be more prominent in this version of Nosferatu. So look at how closely does this particular film follow the story from 1922. Look for things like character development and plot sophistication. Obviously, the plot is going to be much more sophisticated. Just simply by adding dialogue, we're able to hear hear them talk. They're going to be able to explain and talk through things a lot more. Visually, what elements did they keep from the original, and what did they improve on? So what they kept would be kind of paying homage to the original. Like, what are some of the iconic things that we saw in the original that they kind of paid homage to in this one? And then how did the filmmakers use sound to impact the experience? Remember, in the first one, it's a silent film, so sound really wasn't an element that was being used at all. Now, when we watched it, it did have kind of a soundtrack of kind of instrumental music playing underneath it, but that was all added later for effect. But it wasn't what was there when they were watching the original. All right, in this one, the sound that you're going to hear is all part of the movie experience. So continuing on with narrative, okay? This follows a traditional narrative with some flashback sequences. But again, what do we mean by traditional narrative? That it kind of tells the story linearly from beginning to end. It just kind of goes from A to B to C to D, so on and so forth. Again, there are some flashbacks and things like that, but they just kind of give you a little backstory, and then you're right back to the main story. So our core plot in this film is Thomas and Ellen Hutter are newlyweds, which is established a lot better in the current version, in the new version, excuse me. Thomas is trying to secure a lucrative position at his job because he's trying to kind of build a new life, a comfortable life for his new bride, right? So he accepts an account which takes him on a 6-week journey to meet Orlok, who he has no idea who Orlok is, but just knows that if he wants to kind of please his boss and get a position, this is what he has to do. And that is going to create some conflict because he was just newly married and now he's going to have to go on this 6-week journey. All right. Thomas is unaware of the primal connection between his wife, Ellen, and Orlok. So that's a thing that he's unaware of at the beginning, but becomes a prominent part of the story. Orlok makes his way to Ellen and brings the plague to destroy the town that they live in. That's something that's borrowed from the original. That's part of the original story. Our key characters are Ellen, Thomas Hutton, and Orlok. Now, Thomas was more the protagonist in the original. In this one, it's more Ellen Hutton is the protagonist. We're really following her story. And so that's a little bit of a switch. Orlok is still the antagonist in this film, the opposing force, right? Now, when we talked about narrative, we also got into kind of structure. And so let's talk through structure in this film. We do have a central character. And again, it's Ellen in this one. In the original, it was more Thomas, but they switch it in this one. Ellen's goal is to start a new life with Thomas, putting her past behind. She's had kind of a troubled past, dealing with some mental health stuff, which, again, really wasn't a thing at the time the movie is taking place in. But we can kind of infuse those modern ideas because it's a modern audience watching it. Inciting incident. So Thomas Hutter's journey to Orlok, finalizing the sale of the manor, which is what brings Orlok to their town. That's kind of the inciting incident, which happens kind of late in this particular movie compared to when you would normally think an inciting incident would happen. An inciting incident would normally happen within the first 15, 20 minutes of a movie, typically. Midpoint goal shift in this movie. All right. So the midpoint is when Ellen must find a way to break her connection to Orlok. Okay, that's kind of the midpoint of the movie. And her goal shift is originally she's just saying, I want to start my new life. I'm worried about my husband. I want him to come home. That's kind of her dilemma early in the movie. But at the midpoint, she realizes she has to confront Orlok, and how are we going to do it? If I want this to go away, I got to find a way to defeat him or get rid of him or whatever, right? So that's kind of the midpoint in this movie. The climax is when Ellen realizes that she must face Orlok alone, like her. She's the one that's got to do it. She can't have these people help her. Thomas can't do it for her. There's some other characters that become helpful to her, but they can't do it. It's got to be her. And she does face Orlok, but I don't want to give it away because, that's the resolution of the movie. So instead of talking about the resolution, there is one. We're going to talk a little bit about the idea of, what's the difference between drama/comedy versus tragedy, right? So in a drama or comedy, the ending is usually triumphant for our protagonist, right? It's usually a quality, good ending, not necessarily a Disney ending, but it's a good outcome typically for that protagonist, our central character. A tragedy is going to end where it's a negative impact on our central character. So that would be Ellen in this movie, right? So when you're watching this film, as it plays out, watching the end and the resolution will help you understand whether or not this is a drama or whether this is a tragedy. So see if you can kind of make that distinction as you watch through the film. Now, there's one more piece that I want to bring up before we move on, and that's something called a hook. So a hook is an extra piece of the story, and it's not connected to our main plot, right? It's usually there to kind of set up what kind of movie we're watching, maybe give a little backstory, but it isn't part or connected to the main plot line. This film has a hook. So the first 2.5, 3 minutes, I believe, the opening 3 minutes of the film before the title appears, that's called a hook. So it's giving us some backstory and setting up kind of Ellen's story a little bit. And then we see the title of the film, and then the main plot starts. All right. So there's something called a hook and something called a tag. A hook is at the beginning of the film to kind of get us started, to kind of help us understand what kind of movie we're watching and maybe give us some backstory and stuff like that. A tag is something that happens at the end of a movie to kind of, after our main plot has been resolved, maybe they'll show us a tag. And sometimes a tag can maybe lead us to what might be a part 2, or give us a little bit of extra context as to how their lives moved on after the main plot resolved. So again, a hook and a tag. This film doesn't have a tag. This film does have a hook. Still on narrative. Ellen's connection to Orlok is very important in this particular version of the movie. Now, they allude to it, and it is part of the original story, but they're able to do a better job here because we can use dialogue and there's a little bit more sophisticated filmmaking to kind of help tie that all in together. In character development, Ellen is way more developed as a character in this particular version. And then we have these two characters, Frederick and Anna Harding, who kind of take Ellen in when Thomas goes away. Those are characters that I believe are from the Dracula story, and they're way more explored and developed in this version. And then finally, Knock, who ends up being Orlok's kind of minion. He's Thomas Hutton's boss. He is a way more developed character that I believe he is from the Dracula story as well. He's a way more developed character in this version than in the 1922 version. The remake delves deeper into themes like isolation, female sexuality, and repression, which are present but less explored in the original. Again, there's no dialogue to kind of explain that stuff. Plus, there were much more strict rules regarding the content that you could put on screen. So in this particular version, they're able to explore that and be a little bit more explicit with how they show it on screen. So you definitely get that whole idea again of female sexuality and repression in this particular version. So those are things that are a little bit newer. And again, as it's more of a modern film, you have to take into context how kind of not censored. It really wasn't censored in 1922. It's just what was accepted in society, what you could show compared to obviously in 2024.